Welcome to Crochet 201, a virtual class with Rolling Hills Library in St. Joseph, Missouri. Our instructor is Jennifer Stover. Thank you, Jennifer.
Hi, Anali. Thank you very much for hosting me. Thank you to Rolling Hills for putting on this program, allowing for teens and adults, and hopefully you'll be able to learn some fun new techniques today. We've also hosted some knitting courses as well, and our first Crochet 101 class was learning how to work flat. We learned 3 basic stitches, which is the single crochet, the half double crochet, and also our double crochet stitches. Today we're going to learn how to work on the round. And so if you want to take a look at the instruction page, we're learning how to make these really cute nesting bowls. They stack and they have some fun finished edging. First you can do a basic crochet edging. We also have a fun decorative keyhole edging as well. And we also have a backwards crochet stitch. It's also known as the crab stitch. We're going to learn how to start at the bottom by working in the round. We're going to learn how to turn an edge to give it a nice finished flat bottom. And then we're going to learn how to work up the sides. The tools that we're going to need today to use today for our project is our crochet hook. I'm using a basic H hook right here. You definitely want to work with within your yarn. Usually there is a suggested weight measurement on your yarn label, so work with a crochet hook that's consistent. Usually if you're working with a worsted weight yarn, you're going to use either like a G, an H, or an I hook. In addition to our hook today, you also need scissors to cut your yarn. We'll also have a darning needle to weave in our ends, and then also a locking stitch marker. The locking stitch marker is going to be great, so that way we'll know when we start our row, so we won't have any confusion on where where we're going to start or end. It does need to be a locking stitch marker, so you can use a safety pin, you can use a paper clip, you can use a twist tie, anything that you can clip into your fabric and also take out. So with that, we're going to begin. The first thing we need to look at when we're starting our circle, and this is going to be the same way that you would look at for a hat per se, if you wanted to know how big you wanted to create your project. And the easiest way to factor that in is, believe it or not, is pi, 3.14. We're going to use our math skills. To find the diameter of a hat, for example, if you're wanting to make a hat, or if you're wanting to have a specific size basket, you're going to actually do your diameter when you measure. So this diameter is 4 inches wide. And how you're going to do that is, if you want something that is the diameter of, let's say, 14 or 13 inches, you're going to measure it times 3.14, and that will tell you how many inches that you're going to need to measure to get to that diameter. So right now, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with our chain. We're going to work in a spiral. We're going to do a turning row, and then we're going to work down our edge. So let's go ahead and get started with our basic slip knot. Just as a reminder for a slip knot, you're going to wrap it around your finger 2 times. You're going to pass the stitch furthest away from your tip of your finger over to make an X. Then you're going to take your next furthest stitch, pass it over that string, over your finger, and grab both tails and pull. A slip knot is a removable knot, so when you pull it, it will disappear. It is an adjustable knot as well, so if you need to make it bigger or smaller, you can do that. Try to leave about 4 or 5 inches of a tail, so that way you have something to weave in just to secure your ends so it doesn't come unraveled. So again, 2 stitches or 2 loops on your finger, pass one over, pass the second one over and off, and then grab both tails. And then you have your slip knot. Then go ahead and put it on your needle, or on your hook rather, and then you can tighten up. Now for our project, we're just going to chain 2 stitches. And we're not going to work with our tail. We'll set that aside. And again, to do our project, we're doing the project in single crochet today. So that's the only stitch you have to worry about. So we're going to wrap our yarn from the back to the front. And you can grab your loop from your slip knot, pull it through. That's 1. And grab it one more time. And pull through, and that's 2. So we just need 2 stitches to get started. The reason why we're doing 2 stitches is because you can't crochet into this first stitch, because if you did, you would just undo your loop because it's going in there. So you have to go into a stitch that doesn't have a loop already in there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a single crochet 6 times in this one hole in this first chain. So to do a single crochet again, we're going to go in through our stitch, wrap it around, pull through and drop a loop. You have 2 stitches on your hook. We're going to yarn over and go through both stitches. And there's 1 single crochet stitch. And we're going to do that 5 more times. So that's 1. We're going to go in, wrap our yarn around our hook, drop a loop, yarn over, go through the 2 stitches. That's 2. Again, in through that same loop, and we know because the hole is starting to widen, it's getting bigger. Yarn over, drop a loop, yarn over, that's 3. 4. 5. And then if you notice a little bit, I'm actually pulling the stitches down a little bit. That will help me pull the hook through the loops more easily, so it avoids less risk of the yarn splitting or dropping off the hook. So now I have 6 stitches, and the way to confirm that is you can actually count the V's. So if you see, you don't count the V that's actually on the hook. That is technically a live stitch. It's an unworked stitch, so it doesn't count. So we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 right here. So now what we're going to do is work in a spiral and work in a circle. To get to this stitch over here, you may have to tighten up your stitch, and you can just pull your string as far as you can, or your slip knot. And then what we're going to do is just turn, and we're going to work directly into the stitch. And we're going to work in through both V's, if you can see here. And sometimes this first stitch is a little tighter, so you can just kind of move it around with your finger to get through. So we're going to yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through 2. Now for this first round, we're actually going to do 2 single crochets in each stitch. So we're going to double our project from 6 stitches to 12. So I've done 1 single crochet in that hole. I'm just going to go into that same hole, that same stitch below, and do another single crochet. So yarn over. There we go. So that's 2. So let's go in and we're going to do 2 in the next stitch. So yarn over, do 2. And just to make sure that we know where we are for our last stitch, which we should have done after the first one, but let's go ahead and put our stitch marker so that way we know where we're going to be landing. So right now we've done a total of 4. So we've done 1, 2, 3. Here's our 4th stitch right here, just so that way I know which one to go into, because once you start going into a spiral, you won't really know where your beginning or your end is. So if you just put a stitch marker, that will give you guidance so you know where your last stitch is for your row. Okay, so I've done 4 stitches. There's 5. 6, halfway through. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All right, so I ended my second row right before my crochet locking stitch marker. So then that way I knew I ended. Again, it's always good, especially at the beginning, to count your stitches just to make sure you have the same amount. So again, if you wanted to count all your V's, you can start, the easiest way is to start from your hook. Remember, don't count the one that's on your hook, but you can count until you know that you have 12. The next step is you're going to remove your stitch marker. And for this next row, we're going to increase by crocheting 2 stitches, and then we're going to have 1 stitch plain. So what we're going to do is the first stitch we're going to do is just 1 plain single crochet in that stitch. And let's go ahead and put our stitch marker in that stitch. That way we know that's our beginning of our round. So that's 1. And the next stitch, we're going to put 2 single crochets in. And we're going to repeat that around the whole round. And make sure you go through both V's. So we're going to yarn over. And then go in the same stitch again. So now we've done 3 stitches. And we're going to increase in multiples of 6. So this round, we're going to have a total of 18 stitches. So now we're going to do 1 single crochet, then two single crochets in the same stitch. By doing it this way, you are increasing evenly across the round. So we're going to do 1, then 2 single crochets. Again, 1, and then 2 single crochets. And by the time you get to your 3rd row, which is what we're at right now, we have a little more of fabric to hold on to. So it will be a little easier as you go along. So 1 and 2 single crochets. And as you can see, because this is my first stitch, I only have 2 stitches left, which is perfect because I'm going to do 1 single crochet, and then 2 in the same stitch. And that will give me a total of 18 stitches this round. Now, if we follow our pattern, we're going to keep increasing this way by increasing a total of 6 stitches in each round. So this time, we're now going to increase to a total of 24 stitches. And we're now going to, instead of just do 1 stitch in front before we do the 2 single crochets, we're now going to do 2 stitches. So now we're going to do 1 single crochet. And let's go ahead and put our stitch marker on that stitch so that way we know that's the first stitch in our row. And then we're going to do another single crochet. And now we're going to do 2 single crochets in that same stitch. Now, sometimes there are patterns that will have you do the 2 single crochets in the same stitch first and then follow up with the individual crochet stitches. I like to do them at the end because it makes it more of a smoother transition, especially when you are working in the round and you are making a complete round where instead of crocheting in a spiral, you actually finish a round to close the loop, and it will make for a smoother edge and you won't see the big transition. So there are 2 ways to work in the round. One is the spiral that we're doing tonight, and then also one where you connect the round and then you chain up your rows like you would in flat and to start your row height. The reason why I chose to do in a spiral, number one, it's never ending, so it just keeps going and going, which makes it nice. You don't feel like you have to connect at every row. But also it gives it a really fun design. Okay. So do 1, 2, and then we're going to 2 double crochets or 2 single crochets in the same stitch. 1, 2. Get a little bit of a knot in my thread. There we go. So 1, 2, and then 2 in the same stitch. Okay, and then now, see, I bet I missed one because I only have 2 and I should have a total of 3. So I bet I did a single crochet somewhere, an extra one, but I'm going to go ahead and just add our 2 for right now. That's the nice thing about crochet is you don't have to really worry too much. But if I need to find out if I need to add an extra stitch, I'm just going to go ahead and count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So I've missed 2 stitches somewhere. You know what? Let's just go back and count. So this is why it's really good to count for every round. So I have 2, and then I have 2 double crochets, and you can see kind of there, make a little heart shape there. Then I have 2, and then 2 double crochets. I have 2, 2 double crochets, 2, 2 double crochets, 2. Let's see, I have only a single crochet this one. So luckily I don't have to go back very far. So see, even teachers can make a little bit of a mistake, and that's okay. It's good to make sure that we know, because that's how we're also learning too. And really, that's kind of the time when you start learning how to read your work, is when you start making mistakes, because then you have to figure out what you did wrong so you can go back and correct it. So it actually works in your favor. So now I have 1, 2, 3 stitches, and that's what I need to finish. So I have 1, another single crochet, that's by itself, and then 2 single crochets in the same stitch. There we go. Now I'm on track, and I have my 24 stitches. Okay, so now we're going to do it a total of 2 more times, and it's still the same concept. So what you're going to do is, now instead of starting 2 stitches, you're going to do 3 single crochets, 2 in the same stitch, 3 single crochets, 2 in the same stitch, and you're going to increase again by 6 stitches. And then you're going to do it 1 more round. It'll be 5 rounds. That time you'll be doing it 4 single crochets. So as you can see that there is a pattern, and it starts to repeat, so you know if you need to extend it. If you'd like to make it bigger, or if you'd like to make it smaller, you can certainly do that by using that same formula, by doing single crochets and then do a double in 1 stitch, or two single crochets. Now, if we want to actually count our rows, so that way we know what stitch we're in or what row we're in, it's really easy to do. First of all, you can find your center, which is right here, right in this spot, and then just find 1 pattern. Luckily, I'm all the way at the end of the row, so I know that whichever way I count, it's going to be a complete row. So my center here is where my first single crochet started, so that's row 1. Row 2 is right above it, row 3, and then row 4 is my finished. And that's what I like about crochet, is they're a little more defining stitches, so you can definitely see the breaks and the different rows between. So you don't actually count all the way across. You're going to start in the center radius, and then you're going to start counting outwards. So right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 rows, and for our pattern we're actually going to crochet 5 rounds. So right now, actually, I apologize, our single crochet was technically like our round 0. So our 6 single crochets is round 0, and then round 1 is above it, round 2, round 3. So technically I've done 3 rounds within our pattern. If you ever follow a pattern and it does count your single crochets when you first start, that's what you would start with. If not, just always remember that your first stitches in this pattern is not going to count, so you're going to count above. So you're going to do that all the way to round 5 when you get up to a total of 36 stitches. And remember how we can count. And if you ever need to just put your hook down, you can just pull the yarn out, and that'll give you a little bit of leeway. So if you put your hook down, you can put it in your pocket or in a bag without the risk of it losing. You can also take your stitch marker, and you can actually put, if you ever need a break, put it in your project. Of course, if you're not right at the end of your round, I would suggest getting a second stitch marker. That way you know where your actual round is. But as you can see, I can just put my stitch marker on my loop, and I can pull if I want to, and none of these stitches will come undone, which makes it really nice. And then as you're ready again, you can just pull your loop out, bring your stitch out. And then you can just either connect it somewhere in your fabric if you don't want to lose it, or you can set it aside. So for our example, just follow your pattern until you get to 36 stitches. I'm going to stop here and show you our next technique. And so what we're going to do now is learn how to turn our stitch. And for this example here, I'll show the blue one. The turning row will help our project lay flat. As you can see, it has a nice flat bottom, and it has a really pretty seam edge too, so it gives you that structure. And the way to do that is really simple. You're still going to follow the same process as far as single crochet, but now we're only going to go into one of our stitches. We're going to go into the back loop. So if we look at our stitches up and down, of course we have the two that we've been going through. Our back loop is the one that's in the back from us. So we're this is your front leg, and then this is your back. And so we're actually just going to go only into that back stitch and single crochet. Now again, that's our first stitch, so I'm going to go ahead and put my stitch marker in so that way I know where I am. And now we're going to, just for this round only, we're only going to crochet into the back loop. We're not going to increase anymore. We're only going to do stitch for stitch, because once you have the diameter of your hat or your bag or your project, you don't have to increase anymore. So now what we're going to do is do our turn, and then we're going to start working up the side. So just go through, you have the 2 stitches, we're just going to do that back stitch only. Pull through the back loop. Now, a fun way if you wanted to create ribbing, this is how you actually create ribbing, is going through one loop only. And if you do it on every row, you're going to create a nice ribbed fabric. But we're only going to do it on one row, and it will force our fabric to turn upwards. If you go through the front loop, it will turn inwards. So, and it gets a little, more uncomfortable when you're having to work with your project inside. So it's better to do it facing outwards. But as you can see, it's already starting to force the fabric to turn because we're knit or crocheting in that back stitch. We're just going to go ahead and just finish this round. I only have 24 stitches on my project, but you should have the 36 stitches. Now, if you're wanting to make all 3 baskets, in our project, I actually have listed the information for the sizes. So for all of our sizes, for all 3 of our baskets, we're going to go up to round 5. If you're wanting to do the medium and the large size, you're going to do 1 more round. And then if you want to do the largest size, you're going to do an additional round. So if you do all 3, you'll have 1 basket that ends with 36 stitches, 1 that ends with 42 stitches, and 1 that ends with 48 stitches. So it will show you kind of how you're increasing as you're doing 1 extra round every single row. So for us, we're just going to practice this basic information, but still the increasing would be in that same concept of still single crocheting so many stitches before you do a double crochet, single crochet in a stitch. Okay. So we're continuing and see how it's kind of getting this nice little spiral. We can see where we started to because our fabric now we have this little dash here where we don't. So that's another little guideline, especially for this round, when to stop. But we also have our stitch marker too, which is very useful for telling us when to stop and start. And if you're asking, why do you need a stitch marker if you're just working in the round in a spiral, um, the best reason why is because you don't want your spiral to be, or your circle to be oblong, where if you go past it, you may have one side that's a little larger than the other. And we don't want it wonky like that. So just to keep our symmetry, we're going to use our stitch marker or some kind of guiding marker to help us know. Another little tip as well, I'll show you when I get to this. If you absolutely don't have anything handy with you, sometimes I like to start projects while I'm on the go. And if all I have is yarn and a hook with me, how can I start and stop my row? And another way you can do that, and I'll show you. Okay, so I've completed this round. So I'm just going to go ahead, take this off. And now for this next row, or this next round, as you can see, if I kind of flatten it a little bit, it has a nice little crease. Now what we're going to do is just crochet in every stitch all the way around from this point forward. So, like I said, if I don't have a stitch marker handy with me, I'll do this. So there's my first round. And what I'll do is my tail, another perk to having a little bit of a tail, I'll just lay it over. So that way that my tail is facing in before I go into my next stitch. You can also do it before that last stitch too, if you want to as well, just whatever marker that you know. So see, now I have this tail that's right here, and it can easily be pulled out. It's not actually crocheted into it. But now I know that I have a yarn marker here, and that tells me that I need to do something with that stitch, but I know that that is actually my first stitch. And so now what we're going to do is crochet all the way around. And we're going to keep doing that for the rest of the entire project. So you're an expert at single crochet now. And if you continue, for my project, I have it listed for, I believe, a total of 9 rows. Let's see. Yeah, I have it for 9 rounds. And actually 10, because our first stitch, our first round was a single crochet, but we went through the back loop. So then it still counts as a single crochet. You can count that as your 10th row, essentially. And the nice thing about that turning chain, that single crochet, that will give you the guidepost as to where to start counting again, is to start counting your rounds. So now I have 1 round and I have 2 that I'm working on right now. That way you won't avoid, or you'll avoid confusion with your increasing round part. Oops, that one looks a little funky. I'm just going to take that off my hook and start it again. You can also do some fun designs with color if you'd like. Of course, these projects I'm doing all in one color, but if you wanted to do different colors as far as stripes, you may want to change the base of your bottom and do a single color. You can also do, you know, every round to be a different color as well, so you can have some fun stripes in your project if you don't want to have just one color. If you would like to change a project and change a color, it's really easy to do. What you would do is you would take another color, and I have just some green here, and you're going to actually complete your stitch when you start. So what I'm going to do is insert my crochet hook and draw up a loop. So I have 2 stitches. So normally to complete, I would just yarn over and go through 2. Well, I'm wanting to change colors. So what I'm going to do is take my yarn, just put it on my hook, still leave about 5 inches or so you can weave on those ends, and then just complete that stitch with the new color. So now, let's say if I wanted to work with my green, just move that stitch out of the way. Just yarn over, pull through. And this first stitch is a bit wonky just because it has nothing to hold on to. So you may just have to give it a tug and then also give your first color a tug too, just to tighten up the stitches. And you may have to do that your first round as well until you secure it fully. But as you can see, changing colors are really simple to do. And you can just keep crocheting all the way through your project. I wanted to go ahead and finish this round before I show you the next step, so that way you can see how the yarn marker works. Of course, you can work it all the way up, so the longer tail you have, the more opportunity you have to carry it up through your project. As you can see, now I have this yarn in between here, so I know this is my first stitch. So I would just take this off. Actually, I did it after my first stitch, so that was actually my first stitch. So I would take the yarn out, and then I could lay it over, and then I could just start crocheting again. But as you can see, I had a little bit of a color change, and so if I wanted to keep going, all you're going to do is do a single crochet all the way around in a spiral for 9 rows, and plus your 10th row, which is your turning. So right now I have 1, 2 rows complete. So once you've completed your row height for your project, as you can see here, we have completed all of our rows. Now it's time to finish. And you can make your ones as tall as possible. So if you wanted to just do this nice finished edging, you really don't have to do much. Here for this example, as you can see, it's pretty much all finished. All you're going to do, so that way you don't have this gap right here, is you're going to create a slip stitch to finish your edging. Upside down. So to finish it, you're just going to go into the stitch like you would single crochet, but you're not going to drop a loop, you're just going to automatically pull it through both stitches. Then you can cut your yarn and then pull up your stitch. And then if you can see, that kind of smooths out that bump. Of course, it will smooth out the bump. But I want to show you what our next stitch will be. So this will be if you just wanted the basic finished edge. Next, I'm going to show you our fun little keyhole design. And this consists of single crochets, It also consists of chain stitches, and we're also going to skip a couple of stitches. So as you can see, these 2 stitches were not worked, and then we filled it in by giving this cute little shell motif at the top. So let me show you how we did that. So the first thing we're going to need to do is you're going to need to create a little bit of height. So when we finish, you can just stop when you finish your round. We're going to chain 2. So we're going to go 1, 2. So now that we chain 2, we're going to skip 2 stitches. So we're going to skip 1 stitch, 2 stitches, and we're going to go into the 3rd. So as you see, we created a little bit of a hole. So again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go 1, 2, and then we're going to skip our 2 stitches, 1, 2, and we're going to go into the 3rd stitch. So yarn over, go through 2. So as you can see right now we have 2. So let's do it again. 1, 2, skip 2, and go into 3rd. Now this particular edging has a little more height to it. It's going to take 2 rows to complete, or 2 rounds to complete this particular stitch. So because of that, you will need to, if you want to have the same height as the rest of your bowls, you're going to need to start this round 2 stitches before. So when you get to your edging, you're going to actually do it at row 8 rather than, or round 8 rather than round 10. If you'd like the height for it, you can certainly keep that. Now, the reason why, you can probably, if you're wondering why I'm flipping this project inside out, is I'm also a left-handed crocheter. I tend to crochet a little faster with my left hand. So because of that, it turned my project inside out. So that's why it's facing inside, but it's still the same concept. Of course, here in the example, I'm crocheting right-handed for you. Basically, I'm skipping 2. These chain 2, 1, 2. You'll know if you haven't chained, because if you try to reach here, you'll have a hard time and it'll start folding onto yourself. So you want to have the 2 stitches for that allowance to clear the 2 stitches you're skipping. So 1, 2. And this design can be done in multiples of 3. So our project is in multiples of 3. So if you decide to make your project larger or make it smaller, you can certainly do that, and this project will, or this edging will work for your project. So 1, 2, go into the 3rd. And if you want to see if you're doing it consistently, you can just kind of look back, and if your holes are about the same, then you know you're doing it the right way. Turn this on. Let's do 2 again. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3rd. Okay, so I'm back at my project again. So now what I ended up doing, I've now completed in the round all my loops. So now we want to create kind of just a little more body on it. So it'll, number 1, open up the stitches a little more, the holes, but then just give it a prettier edging too. So now what we're going to do is 2 different types. First of all, we're going to do 3 single crochets in the hole. So we're going to go actually not in a stitch, but around the stitch. So we're going to go through, and we're going to do that 3 times. So 1, 2, 3. And now to give it more of a shell look, in our actual single crochet stitch, we're going to do a slip stitch. So the slip stitch is we're going to go into the 2 stitches, going to yarn, maybe a little tight, so you got to kind of pull it. So you yarn over, drop a loop, and then just automatically pull it through. We're not going to yarn over again. Okay, so now we're going to continue. So now we're just going to do 3 single crochets in our hole. 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to slip stitch. Remember, we're not going to yarn over again to create a single crochet. We're just going to pull it through our other stitch. So again, 3 single crochets. Now, a lot of these edgings, you don't really need to worry about having a stitch marker unless it's a multiple one, but usually every round you're doing something different. So that gives you an idea of when your pattern changes. Sometimes it's a little finicky. Oops. And this one's going to be a slip stitch. So as you can see, we're creating these really cute little ruffles up at the top. And we would do that all the way around. When you're done, what you're going to do is just do a slip stitch in your first stitch on that round and pull through. And then that way it'll give you a nice even round when you cut your yarn and weave in your end. So when you connect it, I'll show you here. So here's kind of my beginning. I would just do a slip stitch right into this stitch right here. And then cut your yarn, and then that would give you a nice even scallop all the way through without one side being higher than the other. So that's how we do our scallop edge. And then it would be really cute if you had some ribbon or some other yarn. You can thread it in and out so to create a nice fun design. Our final stitch for the evening is called the crab stitch or the backwards crochet stitch. And it's essentially still a single crochet, but it gives you these fun little bumps. So it definitely gives it a nice finished edge. It's a little sturdier, and it just makes for a really pretty design. To do that one, we're going to use our green here. And our reverse single crochet is exactly how it sounds. We're, instead of going forwards, we're going to go back. So normally this is how I would be, and I would crochet around, but now I'm actually going to go into the stitch behind. And it is a little awkward when you first try to do it. So if you don't feel like you have the hang of it, just keep trying. So That's all it is practice makes perfect. So we're going to take our hook and we're going to go in the back and go in between those 2 stitches. Then you're going to bring your yarn around and come back through. And as you see, it kind of twists the stitches. And then you yarn over and go through to complete the stitch. After you start the first couple of stitches, your hook and your yarn helps guide you a little more, but sometimes those first 2 stitches are a little finicky. So again, you're going to bring your yarn and your hook backwards to your right. You're going to go into that stitch. You're going to grab your yarn and bring it through your loop. And it looks like you have a twisted stitch, and that's perfectly fine. You're going to yarn over and go through 2 stitches. Again, go in through the stitch in the back, wrap your yarn around and drop the loop, yarn over, go through both stitches. So as you can see, kind of right now it looks like a mess, but as you get further along, you see you start to get that really pretty scallop design. So you're going to go in, around, pull up that loop, yarn over, go through 2. Because you are kind of twisting your stitches, you go in, the stitches may feel a little tight when you try to complete your single crochet. So it's very important that you're not working right here in the throat of your crochet hook. You're actually working on this widest part, because this will, number one, help stretch your fabric. And then when you slide it to go through, you now have that gap and that space. If I just work only here at the hook, as you can see right here, there would be no way I could pull my yarn. So you always want to make sure your measurement is at this widest part of the hook. That way, when you bring your project down to the throat of your hook, now you have that gap. You have that space to bring your crochet hook through. Let me do it again for you. So we're going to go in through the back, drop a loop. You have 2 stitches. You're going to yarn over and complete it. And sometimes you kind of have to take your other hand and just kind of wiggle it until you get it through. But as you can see, we're creating these really nice bumps and this really nice design. And you're going to continue that all the way until you get to the first one. And again, you'll just slip stitch into this stitch, cut your yarn and pull up through. And that will give you a nice finish edge that looks like this. And as you can see, this was my beginning. So when I slip stitch, you know, it's pretty seamless when you look at it. So there you go. There's our 3 main bowls that we did today. So we learned how to start and work in the round, and we learned how to increase evenly across our rounds. We learned how to do a turning chain by crocheting into the back loop only. And then we just work straight up in a spiral until we get to our ends. And we've learned 3 different edgings. One, you can just finish and leave as is to give a nice, a plain but a very nice finished edge. We also learned how to do our scalloped edge. And then we also learned how to do our backwards crochet edge. Now, the nice thing about all these pieces is, of course, you can do them in different colors, both individually or within that same project itself. And you can make several more. All you have to do is just keep increasing 1 extra round at a time, and then they'll nest in there very nicely. As you can see, these are a little flimsy, and that's okay. You can make them more stiff if you really want them to stand upright. You can do 2 different things. Number 1, you can go down a crochet hook size, so you're actually crocheting tighter. It's a little more painful on your hands, so you may have to take a break every now and then, but that will give you a tighter gauge, and it will make it for a tighter fabric. Another thing you can do is still keep your same crochet hook, just work with 2 yarns at the same time. If you want to work with 2 different yarns, that would give you a fun pattern and create a really pretty pattern design, or you can just use the same colors throughout, and that would create a stiffer fabric as well. Either way, you're still going to be working a little more tightly, so just be prepared for that you may have to take breaks just to rest your hands as well. When you do work with a project a lot, you end up having a lot of yarn that may not necessarily be finished, and you would want to wind your yarn so that way it's useful next time. So I'm just going to rip out this yarn, and as you can see, I kind of have this nice little mess of yarn, and you can wind your yarn into a ball when you have a little bit left over. And that way you can kind of store it nicely without having to worry about it getting tangled. And you can do it there's a few different ways you can do it. I'm going to show you 2 ways. One is making a center pole ball with your hands. So if you don't have any any tools with you whatsoever, you can wind a ball with your hands. This also works if you're in the middle of a project. So if you have yarn that's attached to a project, you would just work straight close from where your project's connected to the yarn. Here I'm just working from the edge. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your yarn and you're just going to wrap it around your hand, 5 or 6 times. And this is going to create like this tuft. We're just going to have this little clump of yarn right now. And I'm going to take it and I'm just going to put it right up against my thumb. And then what I'm going to do is wind around my thumb and also around that tuft of yarn. As you can see, I'm kind of locking it to my thumb right now. And the important thing is that you want to keep your thumb in while you're winding, because you're going to create a center pull. If you take your thumb out and start winding over this tuft of yarn, then you're going to kind of get a big tangle and lock it in there. So when I wound it around my thumb to kind of create a nice little, a good little bite around, I can start winding in a 45-degree angle. So now I'm just going to start winding diagonally over my thumb. And then when I've kind of filled up this one spot, I can either turn my thumb, or I can hold onto this little tuft of yarn, just kind of wrap your hand around it, and turn your thumb. So now I have a new part to work on over here. And you can just kind of wind up and down or diagonally. Until you've kind of covered a nice space. And then again, holding this tuft and holding the ball, just do a twist, just a little quarter turn twist. And now I can wind again. I can wind and wind. And then now as you're getting a little more, you can just kind of turn your thumb if you want to in your project. Or you can, of course, twist it. And when you do that, when you do take out your thumb, you can kind of push it in just to secure it a little more. Now you have a center pull. So now you can work with your yarn directly from here. So if you pull, here's your project you can work with. And now all your yarn's going to come straight from the center. This is great, especially if you have pets. You're not going to have yarn that is going to bounce all around the house and drive the cats crazy. Another way you can do it is with a yarn ball winder. And I have a winder right here. And this is a good way to do it where it's automatic. You just grab your yarn and lock it in here, and then you just get a handle, and then you just wind it in the direction that you have. You want to have a nice solid flat surface for this project. So then as you wind, you can go until you're done with your yarn. When you're done, you can just take it off. Of course, I would have it off the thing. But it creates, of course, this one's a little sloppy, but it'll create a nice little ball that's a bite size. And again, this one's a center pull as well. When you find your tail, then you just pull right through. And that creates a nice center pull ball as well. Well, that's all I have for you for today. I hope you were able to learn a lot of information, and I hope that this will be some great motivation for you to be able to come back and learn some more tips and techniques. The Rolling Hills Library, they have a lot of great books on their shelves. They also have some books on Overdrive as well, and I know they would be happy to help you find the materials that you need for your project. If you have any questions, please feel free to call the Rolling Hills Library again, and we will talk with you again soon. Thanks so much.